Hi, so today I wanted to do a video about fear and the fears that we have in our lives and essentially breaking out of them. So I felt the Lord leading me to talk about this, and I just kind of started thinking about this morning. I'm sorry if I sound like really tired. I feel like I'm talking really slow. But yeah, I'm just kind of tired and a little bit out of it. But um, yeah, hopefully you guys are doing okay. So I want to talk about the fears that we have in our lives, no matter what it may be for you. But I want to talk about when we just feel imprisoned in fear. And I want to talk about how I feel that the Lord desires for us to not be in that imprisonment. So maybe it's something that you struggle to do because you feel a lot of fear, and now you avoid doing something, or you feel like there's a lot of anxiety that comes when you try to do something. So I really feel the Lord is the one that, leads us to run straight toward our fears and confront them head on, right? We see that in like the story of David and Goliath, for example. Granted, I love David's courage. David seemed practically fearless because he knew God was faithful, because he knew that God's strength would work through his weakness. So, something just kind of came up as I was thinking about this, but a lot of people looked and saw David as like weak, right? They saw him as this weak shepherd boy. He wasn't even considered as one to be king from like his family, and like people that just saw him, the way people looked at him, they didn't think of him as king. They didn't see him the way that God saw him. So a lot of people saw David and they saw someone that was seemingly weak, right? He was like smaller in stature. And so we see the story of David and Goliath. Goliath, he was a giant, and David literally ends up slaying him with just a sling and a stone, which is amazing. But I want to show that because I know fear can be so strong that, we see so many instances actually in the Bible of people, you know, running straight toward their fears and confronting them head on. Now, Goliath wasn't necessarily a fear for David, but a lot of people looked at David and his size and probably, were thinking, what are you doing? They were literally thinking, who are you to do that? Compared to the giant Goliath, compared to the battle, right? David's size and the perceived weakness people saw in David compared to Goliath, right? But God knew that, or sorry, David knew that God, God, God would fight that battle. God would win. He knew that God's strength and power was going to be working in him to slay Goliath. So even though through the world's eyes he looked weak or small in size, and people are wondering, how is he going to slay that giant? Even though Goliath was literally laughing at him, right? What happens? David slays him, right? David wins that battle regardless regardless of his size, regardless of how he was looked at through the world's eyes, and regardless, even if we looked at that story, if David did have fear, which he didn't, David was confident in who God is. But even if David did have fear, it couldn't stop God. And I want to point to the story of the Israelites. So, in the story of the Israelites, we see the Israelites like panicking, right? You see them panicking because the Egyptians are pursuing after them, right? What does God do? God has Moses part the waters of the Red Sea. They're literally coming after them. Can you imagine how terrifying that is? And it's like right at the last minute, right? Moses parts the Red Seas and they're able to completely walk through. And the Egyptians end up being defeated. Now, I want to highlight, imagine the Egyptians. We may not see that David was scared, but the Egyptians, they were terrified. They were panicking. They were gripped in fear and anxiety and probably just complete overwhelm. Can you imagine? Literally, you have enemies pursuing you. But despite all the fear that the Israelites felt, despite the panic, despite the overwhelm, God was leading through. And their fear, their panic, their anxiety, their overwhelm was no match for God. Nothing can come against his power. And I want you to understand that right now. Because sometimes we can just feel like our anxiety feels so heavy, or maybe we deal with doubt, or maybe we deal with fear. And it can feel so heavy and so strong and intense sometimes. It can make us feel like because we feel this way, like this is the reality of things, this is the way things are. We can even feel like, maybe God is not there in the midst of all the fear we feel, or like he's not going to come through. But we look at these stories and we see literally, right, this amazing miracle of the parting of the Red Sea. But we see all the fears and anxieties that the Israelites probably felt, like we can only imagine. But we see that, right? We see God's faithfulness. We see God fought that battle for them. But more than that, he defeated the Egyptians. And we see specifically their fear was no match for him. That nothing could come against his power, no fear of theirs. And I want you to remember that today. That whatever fear you are facing, whatever anxiety that you might have, whatever overwhelm that you might feel, that nothing can come against the Lord's power. That nothing can come against him. Perhaps maybe you're dealing with what feels like a spiritual attack or a spiritual battle, and it might feel really strong and intense, but nothing can come against him. Nothing can come against our God. Nothing can stand against his power. So even though you may feel fear, even though you may feel anxiety, even though you may feel overwhelmed, even though you may feel panic, it doesn't mean that you're not going to get through this situation. It doesn't mean that God's not going to work through it, or that he can't work through it, no matter how hopeless it may seem. But what this story shows, well, both these stories, right, in the midst of David's weakness, and then in the midst of the Israelites' immense fear and anxiety and panic and overwhelm. These stories remind us that no matter what the situation may look like, no matter what the circumstance may look like, that He will bring us through. Nothing can come against Him. Even when fear feels really intense. And I hope you can take that in right now if you are dealing with any kind of fear or anxiety. That you don't have to be afraid. That you don't have to follow that fear. That nothing can come against Him. Nothing the Israelites felt was a match for God. And just because they felt the way they did, just because they felt like they weren't going to be able to get away from the Egyptians, just because they felt this immense fear and anxiety and panic and dread and overwhelm, right? It didn't mean that God wasn't going to bring through. But not only that, but He made a way for them, right? He parted the seas so they could walk through. So I hope that this video can be a reminder that this wasn't necessarily the message that I was going to do, but I felt the Lord leading me to come on here and talk about fear. So this is kind of what came out, but I hope that this video can be a reminder of whatever you're facing, that the fears may feel intense, anxieties may feel overwhelming, but even though you may feel that way, nothing can stand against His power, His amazing power. So thank you so much for watching, and I hope you're doing alright. God bless you.